GxP and GxP validation is ensuring that part of your system follows best industry standards, that is accurate, reproducible. So, for example, you can validate your R code, Shiny app, your data, to be sure that it follows best industry standards.
If I don't follow those good practices, like what are the risks?
The largest risk is that the FDA can reject your submission. But to be honest, I've never heard about a situation that FDA rejected the whole submission because of problems with software. Like the most common reasons for rejecting a submission is, for example, insufficient clinical evidence, incomplete data, safety concerns, like the drug risks outweighed potential benefits, manufacturing quality concerns. But I know many examples when FDA had a regular inspection at the company and found issues with the software used in clinical trials.
If I'm a, let's say, director in a pharmaceutical company and I'm designing clinical trials, like, why should I care about this?
You hire new talent, and this new talent, as I mentioned before, will prefer to work with open source and modern tools.
Mm-hmm. So what are the biggest benefits of moving to R?
The biggest leverage you get is you leverage the innovation of the open source community, and because of this ongoing innovations on new packages, new methods of developing software, you can develop your results much faster, and you also get access to the much wider talent pool of young generations of biostatisticians and scientists who use R in their daily work.
This is where we bridge the gap between innovation and scientific discovery. This is where technology meets science, a podcast by Appsilon. Each episode brings you insights from industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in life sciences. Enjoy, and if you like the series, click that subscribe button. This series is brought to you by Appsilon, a technology company that empowers pharmaceutical and life science companies to leverage open source technology for faster, data-driven decision-making in regulated environments. Welcome back to another episode of Where Technology Meets Science. Today we're going to speak about GxP and GxP in software engineering in particular. And the person that is going to give us a little bit of clarity and help us better understand the concept is one of Appsilon's co-founders. He started as a software engineer, but he worked in various roles within the company, from a product manager, a vice president of engineering, chief operations officer, chief revenue officer now. Paweł Przytuła, welcome. It's really great to have you here.
Hello, Natalia. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this introduction. As you can hear, I wear many hats. But from the background, I'm a software engineer. I started as a full stack engineer, so I work with many different technologies, not only with R, but during my journey, I discovered R. I got in love with it. I got in love with Shiny, and this is how I landed here at Appsilon, working with data science projects.
And I think like having such a broad experience in many different roles, in many different positions, gave you a very rare opportunity to look at the companies that we work with, life science companies, pharma companies, from different perspectives, to see how they operate from different perspectives, and both from business and technical part. But could you tell us a little bit more about how you and how the company specialized working with life science and pharma?
Sure. So when we started Appsilon, we were working with many different industries. And I really enjoyed that because every project was different. So in one project, I could optimize supply chains. In another project, I worked with life sciences, and in another with real estate. So what connected all these projects was data. But over time, I worked with more and more pharmaceutical projects. My first project for pharma at Appsilon was for Roche, when I developed data science workflows, infrastructure. I worked with reproducibility, where my full stack knowledge could help data scientists deliver their results in more efficient way. And over time, Appsilon naturally attracted more and more pharmaceutical projects because R is very popular in life sciences. And over time, we observed that we get more life science projects and we can specialize. And when we combine that with the purpose of our company to preserve and improve human life, we thought that this is natural path for us to also specialize in pharmaceutical projects. And naturally, we went this path, and this is how we landed in life sciences industry.
Yeah, and now we do work with 8 out of 10 top pharmaceutical companies. But let's go back to GxP. I remember talking to you when you got back from Pharma Summit, and you said that GxP was on everybody's lips. Everyone was talking about it. It was the hottest topic, but a lot of people were not sure how to deal with it. What is exactly GxP? So do you feel like the situation changed? Is there more awareness within the industry, or is it still like people need more guidance how to deal with GxP and regulatory compliance?
I think the situation is developing because we already have examples of pharmaceutical companies that went through this path, and they already submitted their first FDA submission using R, and they share their stories on conferences, and they are very interesting. So we heard about Novo Nordisk. Last year, Roche shared their story. And there are many working groups where specialists from different pharmaceutical companies work together to clarify what should be the standard of developing R solutions that will be submitted to FDA or EMA. And the awareness is growing. I think it is mostly because the generational change. So there are more and more biostatisticians coming from academia. They are used to work R, and they are used to work with open source. And naturally, when they work at pharma company, they want to use these tools and want to develop their solutions fast. So pharmaceutical companies also see this shift, that the talent preference is to work with R. Of course, you can get your results faster using R and other open source tools. So many pharmaceutical companies and teams that I spoke with already think about this topic. They're on very different stages. Some of them are at the beginning, so they just start developing their statistical computing environment strategy, how to build their infrastructure to support open source. Some of them already are in progress, and there are some examples that already went through this path. So the awareness is growing, and I think I can tell you in the next points some examples how industry works on increasing GxP awareness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but let's start with the fundamentals and explain in very simple language what is GxP in a broad sense.
In short, GxP tells you about good practices, how to develop something the right way. Of course, we are talking about software development, but there are many different types of GxP. There is GxP for laboratory practice, for manufacturing practice, but here we are talking about software engineering. And in a broad sense, GxP and GxP validation is ensuring that part of your system follows best industry standards, that is accurate, reproducible. So, for example, you can validate your R code, Shiny app, your data, to be sure that it follows best industry standards.
Mm-hmm. So depending on what we put in that X in between GxP means good practices, and then depending on what we put in the X, it will refer to different areas. So we do we do deal with software engineering, good practices in software engineering. But could you tell me, if I'm a, let's say, director in a pharmaceutical company and I'm designing critical trials, why should I care about this?
For two reasons. So first of all, you want your code to be accurate, so your conclusions from clinical trials are correct. And second, you should care because you hire new talent, and this new talent, as I mentioned before, will prefer to work with open source and modern tools. So if you clarify how to follow the industry best practices, you will open up for open source, and this way you will open up for huge amount of talent pool who want to do clinical trials using R.
Is there anything that if I don't follow those good practices, like what are the risks, except for not getting the best talent?
Like the largest risk is that the FDA can reject your submission, but to be honest, I've never heard about a situation that FDA rejected the whole submission because of problems with software. Like the most common reasons for rejecting a submission is, for example, insufficient clinical evidence, incomplete data, safety concerns, like the drug risks outweighed potential benefits, manufacturing quality concerns. But I know many examples when FDA had a regular inspection at the company and found issues with the software used in clinical trials. So, for example, they found software bugs, that the systems are not validated correctly, lack of security mechanisms, no backup, missing audit trails. So if you just Google FDA inspection reports, you can find many examples what FDA is looking for.
And then in terms of the validation process, what do we need to validate?
Well, I would say everything that you will use to prove to FDA that your drug is effective. So anything that you send to FDA, you should be sure it's correct. And when we talk about the software, it should be the data, the statistical models, the code that you use to build reports, your statistical computing environment. Yeah, more or less, this is the list.
And then in terms of the talent and the skill set, what kind of competencies should the companies, pharmaceutical companies, be looking for to make sure they meet those validation?
Right. Yeah. So I would answer this way. So to ensure that you follow the best practices in your software engineering part and data science part, I believe it's good to have trusted partner or engineers who developed software professionally. So you can go both ways. You can hire these engineers or you can find this partner, especially that now software can be developed by anyone, especially with the AI assistance. And that's good because this is a powerful tool for scientists, but for them, software will be always an additional tool. They haven't spent their time in debugging code a lot or finding edge cases to write unit tests. I will just compare that with my experience. So as a software engineer, I started, I participated in a lot of programming competitions where the main goal was to write correct code and find all possible edge cases where your code can fail. And I spent whole days finding these issues in the code and these edge cases. And I completely understand when a biostatistician is focused on the clinical trial analysis, but the software engineering experience is completely different. So it's good to have a software engineer in your team who will ensure that the code is correct. Of course, this is not everything because you need a subject matter expert who knows what is being done in the statistical model or the code related to clinical trials. But having such talent in your team will ensure your code has much higher quality. And one more thing I can add here, I also recommend looking at the code quality and not optimizing your costs by offshoring the software development. Because this is a myth. Like on the management level, it may sound reasonable to reduce costs by offshoring your software development. But in some cases, you can lose the code quality in between because you will not get full stack software engineers who exactly know how to check the code quality.
And also that understanding of the domain area.
Yeah, like the combination of the area and having this full stack software engineering experience, like this is the best spot where you can be.
And what tools do we use to validate open source code? Can you talk us briefly for maybe like open source packages? What about the infrastructure?
Well, it depends on the thing that you want to validate and your strategy. So, for example, when you want to validate your open source packages that you use in your clinical trials code, you can there are tools available that can help you spot which packages can be trusted and on which packages you should focus on to test them better. So, for example, there is a package risk assessment. There are also other ways to validate your package. You can just have the coding strategy that every code that you use is unit tested well. You have 100% code coverage, and you achieve that by having high software engineering culture. You have set up all the workflows like continuous integration. You don't let any code that is not well tested to go to production. In other teams, you can have the quality assurance team and teams dedicated to checking your code quality. There is also a strategy that you can take advantage of trusted vendor who can, if we speak about statistical computing environment, you can reach out to the company that offers you SCE that is properly validated, and you can take advantage of that. So as you can see, there are many areas where GxP is applied, and there can be many strategies how you can achieve that.
So maybe let's just go back to the examples. You mentioned at the beginning Roche, Novo Nordisk. Are there any other examples? And if you could just maybe like briefly share how they approach the GxP validation of their software.
I can think about a couple of examples where the company went through the transformation from SaaS to R. So one of the nice examples is GSK for me. So they transformed their whole organization to R. And the important lesson from their transformation is that you need an ongoing support for all the biostatisticians and people in the team that use R to be supported in this change process. So it wasn't like a one-day change that the company told everyone, okay, let's stop using SaaS, let's now use R. But they had excellence center and the team that supported biostatisticians in their struggles. So when they had issues with R and all the stack that came with this technology, they had support. This change took multiple months, so it wasn't quick change, but I really like how they approached it in realistic way, that all people that are going to use R need to be supported, and this change should be gradual, and this is how it started. And after transitioning to R, they are ready with increasing their quality expectations. Okay, so now we went to R, and now let's focus on all GxP practices and become excellent into applying them. So this is an example for me how the transition can be handled. And I can refer to many nice presentations from GSK on multiple conferences where they shared how their story of transition went.
Make sure to share them in the notes. But so if you say about multiple months involving the whole company, like I can only imagine how big were the teams of statisticians in those companies, in this company. So what are the biggest like trade-offs? What are the biggest benefits of moving to R in that case? Because if you invest so many months, so much money into this, I guess it has to be worth it.
Yes, so the biggest leverage you get is you leverage the innovation of the open source community, and because of this ongoing innovations on new packages, new methods of developing software, you can develop your results much faster. And you also get access to the much wider talent pool of young generations of biostatisticians and scientists who use R in their daily work. And of course, this transition doesn't come free because proprietary software got the safety space for you because there is some company behind this proprietary software like SaaS that guarantees you the GxP behind it and the results of the code. But when you go into R, there is no warranty that the results you get with open source will be correct. So the responsibility also is on you to train your people, to develop the workflow that will follow the best practices. And when you submit the code for the regulatory review, you ensure that everything there is correct. Maybe on top of that, I can share with you a couple of other examples of companies that inspire me, and I will list them quickly. So I'm also inspired by Roche and their contributions to open source and the packages that they develop. I also really like how Roche developed and organized their IT department in Poland. So this is an interesting thing that they have a dedicated IT department where they hire software engineers, and a lot of Polish software engineers join their team because they have really exciting challenges there. And at the same time, Roche ensures a really interesting mix of biostatistical talent in their teams all over the world and software engineering skills hired in Poland. So this is a very interesting approach. Additional example when you ask about GxP practices is from Novo Nordisk, when they were looking for...
They were the first ones, right, to submit with...
I suppose so. Like, I cannot guarantee that they were the first ones, but when I heard about their R submission in 2021, I think, I believe they were the first who shared their story of submitting the first review to FDA using R. Yeah, and Novo Nordisk is really nice example in terms of statistical computing environment. So when they also wanted to have high quality statistical computing environment that will enable them to follow the GxP practices, what they did is that they didn't implement all this infrastructure on their own, but they prepared for the RFQ and they listed all their expectations from the statistical computing environment they need. They created a list of expectations of a vendor that can deliver such statistical computing environment. And they invited like from 8 to 9 vendors to participate in this RFQ. And then, of course, they reviewed their proposals, comparing against the weights in their list of expectations. And later, after they chose the ideal vendor for them, they shared their process on the presentation. I think it was on Fuse in 2023. And this presentation gives a lot of inspiration how, as a pharmaceutical company, you can approach the process of choosing the right vendor that can allow you to build the best solution suitable to your needs, especially in terms of the GxP. So I really recommend reading this presentation because this is a knowledge worth sharing. And to me, this is also an inspirational story because as you can notice, I'm not talking here only about developing packages, validating them, because GxP has different flavors. There is the right approach to hiring. So how you can find software engineers that will fill the gap of the software quality testing skill. There is the approach of how to validate packages using risk assessment and other open source tools. But there is also a strategy based on choosing the right vendor. And you can follow the path that Novo Nordisk did. This is very complex topics touching very different categories. And on every this category, you can have your own strategy.
That's very interesting. And also make sure to also share the presentation from Novo Nordisk in the notes as well. Could you say what emerging technologies are going to have the biggest impact on GxP compliance and maybe compliance in general in the pharmaceutical industry in the coming years?
Mhm. Yeah, so when we still talk about the software engineering part and the data science part, to me, there are two technologies that will definitely impact GxP and R-based submissions in the next years. So the first is more obvious one, or maybe both are obvious. The statistical computing environments will become more advanced and suitable to the needs of pharmaceutical companies. So when you think about STE, there are amazing POSIT products. I see how they develop them and how they adjust their functionalities to the increasing needs coming from the GxP. If we speak about alternatives, there is Domino. Domino organized the STE coalition. They organized a group of pharmaceutical companies to talk about the ideal STE that they need. And I am betting that there will be something great coming out of all these initiatives from the great work of POSIT and from these initiatives from Domino, and there will be for sure other vendors offering STE. And the second emerging technology is leveraging AI in coding. But many people, when they think about AI and code, think that it's mostly about writing code by AI, but you can also use AI to ensure quality of your code. For example, to debug your code, to write really strong unit tests. Like writing unit tests is pretty boring task for many engineers or people who are not like a software engineer from the background. They might feel like, okay, unit tests are not that exciting, like writing the application or writing the code or visualizations. So AI can speed up this process, and not only speed up, but actually it can help you find edge cases to your tests, so your tests can be much stronger. So these are two places where I see the potential.
And the last question I want to ask, if you could tell us a little more how the community and the industry, because we have FDA, we have all the regulatory bodies, but we also have a lot of organizations like, for instance, R-Consortium or like the organizations that are supporting and working together to create that open source and exchange the knowledge, exchange the skills. And what's their impact in making this shift to open source faster?
Yeah, so personally, I'm a big fan of the R-Consortium, R Submissions working group. And this group is responsible for developing pilot projects in collaboration with FDA. And in every pilot project, so far there were four projects like this, they do step-by-step an exploration how R can be used in R-based submission, and they get feedback from FDA if their approach is correct and what should be improved in the next submissions. So they started with the first pilot where the R-based submission can meet the standards of an FDA. In the second pilot, they tested if the Shiny app can be approved by FDA. The pilot 3 checked the concept if you can use ADAM datasets in combination with R and send it to FDA. And right now, the last pilot is under the FDA review. The pilot 4 was about sending the Shiny app bundled in WebAssembly package. So you don't need to download any external resources when you run the app as FDA inspector, but you got everything bundled in the one file. And this R-Consortium, R Submission Working Group, to me personally, they do amazing job because pharmaceutical companies lack this visibility, lack this example how R can be sent to FDA. And this group sets the standard that will be used in the next years. And this is one example. So you asked me about other community initiatives. So there is also the Pharmaverse and other R-Consortium's working groups. I remember also our Validation Hub and Fuse working groups focused on open source in clinical data analysis.
We have the last question that we ask to all of our guests in the podcast. What's the problem in your field that you are surprised that has not been solved yet?
Okay, I will come back to the unit tests because what surprises me is that in the industry, in the data science, in life science, there is focus on validating packages by their risk. And for example, there is an assumption that if you have 100% code coverage, your code is properly tested. But the point that is not properly taken care of is how strong are these unit tests are, because you can have 100% code coverage, but you can have weak unit tests that don't test every edge case of your code. And you can even have that on the production, and every KPI or metric can tell you that, okay, this package has low risk, this package has 100 unit tests. But in reality, the whole package can be wrong because you tested it with weak unit tests. And this is one thing that I am surprised, or maybe not surprised, but I wish improves. But what surprises me is that increasing quality, paying technical depth, focusing on improving and finding quality in those edge cases is rather a boring task. And whenever I was developing a project and I was trying to convince the budget owner or someone decisive that, okay, let's spend this sprint on paying the technical depth, improving the code quality, it's quite hard to convince the decision makers to do this. And I wish it changes. So the awareness of decision makers, I wish it increases in the next years. So we don't hide behind easy solutions like, okay, my code coverage is 100%, but actually paying this technical depth, first identifying it, and later implementing all the solutions, even if it doesn't bring you a nice effect after the sprint or after the milestone. You will not get a beautiful application or any new feature that you needed, but you will get much higher quality of the code. Paying technical depth is hard to show and it's not spectacular. So I wish it changes in the next years and companies will invest more into code quality.
Yeah, because if it works, it works. But then like if you start scaling up and then if the problems are actually started coming up, this is where you actually can show it. Like you should have done it earlier. Thank you so much, Paweł. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much all for listening. And I'll hopefully see you in the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This was Where Technology Meets Science by Appsilon. If you know someone who might enjoy this episode, share it with them and subscribe to never miss a new episode. At Appsilon, we empower pharmaceutical and life science companies to leverage open source technology for faster data-driven decision-making in regulated environments. Until the next time.